And we are live. I know. What do you mean live? It's 3:30 on Thursday afternoon. But sometimes opportunities present themselves and we just cannot say no. Everyone knows this is Boston, NAACP weekend. Lots going on. And we still have business to take care of in DC. So we are honored to have our Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley here. WWOC Media, Dianne Wilkerson here with you today. Senator Wilkerson, you know my fierce and fearless colleague, Citywide City Councilor Julia Mejia. She does evenings. She's in campaign mode as well. But this is a very important week and a lot happening, and we're going to have an opportunity to hear it from the genius, our queen's mouth. Right from Capitol Hill, Representative Pressley, I know that you're going to be with us this weekend, but right now there's stuff happening in DC. So welcome. The floor is yours. I'm going to enjoy you while we have you because I know you're going to have to move to get back out soon. So please welcome, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, well, thank you again for creating this platform, and that's something you've done throughout your life, which is creating platform, creating space to inform, empower, engage, and mobilize. And it is certainly very important that we are doing that in this moment. A month ago, Senator, I had the great honor of being asked to reimagine the final Sunday sermon of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Washington Cathedral. And in 1968, when he was actually one of the most disliked, unpopular men in America.
Reminds people of that.
When he delivered that final Sunday sermon, he challenged us to stay awake in the midst of a great revolution in 1968. And those words are ever resonant in this moment in Washington against the backdrop of those who seek to lull us into a permanent sleep state and to weaponize what it means to be woke. They seek to lull us into a permanent sleep state with policy violence and scarcity budgets and an anti-Blackness codified in budgets, legislation, and rhetoric. And so that is why it is especially important at this moment, given the systemic anti-Blackness with the Supreme Court overturning affirmative action in higher education, with the country in the midst of a march towards a national ban on abortion, which is forced birth with a disparate burden on Black women. We see our Black maternal morbidity crisis is only worsening in this moment with the Supreme Court ruling against us on student debt cancellation. Again, that is a burden disproportionately on the shoulders of Black student borrowers. And so that is why, against the backdrop of the 114th NAACP convention, that I am bringing some members of the Congressional Black Caucus to Boston on Saturday for what is a national effort, Democracy for the People. This is a nationwide tour led by the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, which is taking place in 10 cities over the summer, because we have to stay awake in the midst of a great revolution. And so each stop on the tour consists of an organizer training and a town hall with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. That will take place today at the historic Roxbury Community College against the backdrop of RCC's 50th anniversary. This will be there'll be a conversation with some members of the Congressional Black Caucus, talking about what does democracy for the people really mean and look like, just talking amongst ourselves. And then we'll have some panels, and then we will turn it over to the floor to public opinion, so that members of the Congressional Black Caucus, especially our chair, Congressman Stephen Horsford, can hear directly from you about what the Congressional Black Caucus should be prioritizing, what is resonant and top of mind for people. So that will be Saturday, July 29th from 3 to 5 p.m. at Roxbury Community College in the academic building. You and your listeners are welcome to join us, and you can RSVP at democracyforthepeople.org. So again, we'll be having a community town hall with the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford, and several other members from the Congressional Black Caucus. This is the biggest Congressional Black Caucus in the history of the caucus. And it was just last week we marked the transition anniversary of John Lewis. He and Barbara Lee and Maxine Waters and Jim Clyburn and so many others have been the conscience of the Congress and continue to be. So I hope that people will join us. Again, that's Saturday, July 29th from 3 to 5 p.m. at Roxbury Community College in the academic building. And you can RSVP at democracyforthepeople.org. We'll be covering a range of topics, but we'll be very focused on the lens of housing justice.
There's so much. I wonder sometime how, with the list that you ran of all the things that are pressing for us, not just issues, but pressing issues in the moment. Like what must the day be like trying to move from housing, the student loan debt, to Black maternal health, to just a full-on attack on democracy, to voting right access, because you're in it and you don't get to kind of sign out.
You know, the thing, Senator, is that I was talking with a sibling, Alexis McGill Johnson of Planned Parenthood in the movement recently, and she said that hopelessness is a privilege. And I kind of agree with that, because when you are the most marginalized, you have no choice but to keep hope. And so this job reminds me every day that hope is a practice, it is a discipline, and the people of the Massachusetts 7th make it easier for me to practice that every day. I really increasingly have wanted to be called a representative instead of a congresswoman, because what greater calling could there be or pursuit than to be a representative of the people sent to Washington with a mandate to change the legacy of the Massachusetts 7th as one of the most unequal districts in the country. Governing under a Republican majority is challenging and at times violent and certainly chaotic. It seems confusion and chaos is the strategy and not the symptom, especially when you consider how we started this 118th Congress, with multiple ballots to elect leadership. So I'm sojourning on. Some days it's really just harm mitigation, and other days we're able to advance the cause. But policy is my love language, and I don't wait to legislate or seek to do that only when we have the gavel and we're in the majority. And so I do want to lift up, in particular, since our Democracy for the People town hall, again, the Congressional Black Caucus Institute is doing these throughout the country, 10 cities. Boston is one of those, Saturday, July 29th, 3 to 5 RCC. Much of that conversation will be steered towards housing. So I do want to lift up, given my position on the Financial Services Committee and how intersectional the issue of housing is, I do want to lift up a bill that I recently introduced that we developed in partnership with community, and that is the Housing First Act. And this is to specifically address the discrimination that our neighbors, our loved ones experience post-incarceration when seeking to reintegrate into society. And so this
very large percentage of that population, by the way.
Yeah, and I want to give you the acronym. I'm going to check my notes because I want to get it right. There's so many bills. So this is the Housing for Formerly Incarcerated Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. So that's how you get the acronym of FIRST, okay? The Housing for Formerly Incarcerated Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. And so what our bill would do is help those who are formerly incarcerated and those with criminal histories be able to access safe and stable housing by limiting the inclusion of criminal history on tenant background checks. This is actually work that I started when I was on the Boston City Council. And so to be able to take that in the micro and now be able to seek to address it on the federal level in the macro. I mean, we know that landlords are refusing to rent to folks with a criminal record. That impacts nearly 1 in 3 adults in America, with Black and brown folks having the highest rates of housing denials. And formerly incarcerated people are 10 times more likely to be homeless. And in fact, I don't know the most current statistic, but I know at one point, 30% of those within Suffolk County, upon being released, were being released to shelter.
That's right.
And so that's disingenuous. If you want to break cycles of recidivism, if you want to support healthy and successful family reunification, if you want folks after they've paid their debt to be able to make a positive contribution, we know housing is fundamental to everything: health, social and economic mobility. And so I did want to lift that up. The Housing First Act. It's
so necessary.
Economic housing justice. So I want to encourage everyone, because I know your listenership is wide. Please ask your member of Congress. There's at any one time there's 12,000 active pieces of legislation, and we certainly do our best to make sure that every member of our delegation is aware. But if I'm not your member of Congress and you live in Massachusetts, please do lobby your member and encourage them to be a co-sponsor of the Housing First Act. And again, for the town hall, you can RSVP at democracyforthepeople.org. We'll be at the Roxbury Community College Academic building from 3 to 5 p.m. on Saturday, July 29th.
I don't know, Congresswoman, a representative, I don't know if you can see it, but Rosa Tam Clayton, her response to you was just, I think it's 15 hearts, red hearts.
Well, thank you.
To me, that's so appropriate because, I remember really just moving from my house to the State House, and people would see me after a week and say, I haven't seen you. And I have to remind them, my work is in that building on Beacon Hill. Your work is in that building, or those buildings in DC. And so, and it's incredibly challenging, like you said, sometimes violent work. One of the things that you touched on it, and you called it harm mitigation. People, are able to know often and celebrate the things that you're able to do, but they very rarely understand the things that you stop from happening, which often tend to be more important than the things that you get done. Is that, especially in this environment where we see that level of crazy coming, I can only imagine. I really want you to comment on that, because
Senator,
it's so much a part of the work.
Yeah, of course, you're speaking from experience, so you know that. I mean, we don't do press releases on what we stopped. These aren't, but just know that, the fight is underway all day, every day. And I would, again, bringing up this far right extremist imbalanced Supreme Court, which is doing something unprecedented in that they're legislating from the bench. When they overturned affirmative action in higher ed, it really, in many ways, it is precedent setting, and there is a trickle down effect. And so we see here in Washington that anything that includes diversity, equity, inclusion, anything that names that is stripped. They don't even want that language to exist in any statute if they can help it. Just recently I was dealing with some discrimination around some projects that I submitted for what we used to call earmarks, but we now call community project funding. Simply because it was LGBT elder housing. And so the project wasn't rejected on its merit. It was rejected just because LGBTQ was named. And so I hope that just gives people some context for what we're managing here, but it's not stopping the fight. I'm still was proud to sign on to multiple pieces of legislation regarding reparations. That fight continues. And I do also want to name another bill that is mine, Senator, which I think we've spoken about before, and that's my baby bonds legislation with Senator Booker. I'm very excited about this because while we're still fighting to get it done federally, there are governors and state legislatures rather throughout the country who have been able to pass this. And I know that our treasurer, Deb Goldberg, is looking at a pilot program right now, and that is upon birth for babies born in the lowest socioeconomic income brackets, the Treasury would make a deposit of a $1,000 bond. They would pay into that over the next 18 years. At the age of 18, you're able to withdraw those funds for 3 uses only: to purchase a home in order to build wealth and equity, to pursue higher education, or to start a business. This is the type of, I think, very precise legislation we need to be advancing, because the harm done to Black folks and marginalized people was very precise. There was nothing opaque about it. And there are guesstimates that at the age of 18, when you withdraw those funds, that it could yield as much of, depending on where you fall on the socioeconomic ladder, as much as $18,000 to $24,000. So that is certainly something that could be a down payment, on a home to purchase and to build wealth and to be able to benefit from that equity in perpetuity. And so these are some of the prescriptive legislative responses that we've initiated. And again, that's in partnership with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. And there's great momentum throughout the country for this. And as I said, more than a handful of states have already passed it.
It's so ironic, because I know you know this, that the irony of the madness and the violence coming from the right is that the country has never been in a better position to right the wrongs of the past, if that's what the intention is to do. The city of Boston is comfortable in resources. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as the Globe says, is flush with cash. The federal government. I'm watching the GDP reports this morning, of course, following the impact of the work that Bidenomics has had and having across the country. We have over 1,150, my last count, corporations, philanthropic institutions that pledge monies for racial and social equity post George Floyd. You would think that would create a moment, but yet here we find ourselves in probably the biggest fight of our lives, in the toughest moment, because you're trying to hold back the crazy, as I said. So that program, that concept, absolutely on target. Absolutely on target.
But and I've mentioned to you, that's certainly something that we're looking at in my role in financial services, and just my team in particular, around an audit of commitments that were made during the so-called racial reckoning, and where those things landed. It's very typical that once the headlines fade, so too does the commitment. And look, I would never give short shrift to symbolism. It matters when we remove statues and we enshrine centers and institutes and holidays, and affirm that our lives matter, in spaces of public accommodation. But a reckoning means that we are advancing budgets and policies that are commiserate to the harm done.
That's right.
And that has not yet happened.
That's right.
By any stretch of the imagination. I was thinking about Reverend Jackson, and I don't know if you saw that he recently passed the baton at Rainbow Push Coalition. It was very emotional. And of course, I have the honor of serving with one of his sons in Congress now, who's a freshman, Jonathan Jackson. And I remember Reverend Jackson one day saying that, Black folks are so used to making the best out of a bad situation that we forgot that we could demand that it's not bad to begin with. And I think in many ways that says it all. And so
it sure does.
The harm is systemic, it's structural, it's pervasive, it's precise, it's intentional. And so I know that there's not one bill including reparations, that can undo centuries of harm. But I do believe that with vigilance, with demand, with the power um, of us, that by moving multiple pieces of legislation, that we can yield some progress in undoing the harm.
I believe that. I believe that, and when I'm betting on us, and I think that when I said when the chips are down, I'm always going to bet on us, because the fact our mere existence right now today is proof positive of the level of fight and resilience, focus. Yeah, it shouldn't have to be this way, but whenever it is, we're ready for that moment.
Yeah, and I forgot to name in the fight you know, to stop the whitewashing of history.
You notice where I'm sitting in my office, I posted on Facebook a month ago that I literally look up one day and realize I'm sitting in my library. I'm sitting in a library of banned books.
Oh, banned books. I love it. That's what made me bring it up, actually, because I know that that is one element that the NAACP convention, that the youth will be, I guess, presenting or distributing or giving away banned books. But I mean, what can I say? I was going to say winter is coming, Black folks, but it sort of has never not been.
We're ready. That's what I'm saying. This too shall pass. That's why I'm gonna make sure that whenever I'm on a camera, they're gonna see some of those books, because I make it a point of switching them out every day, and it is so much a part of who we are. The idea that, crazy. Anyway.
Well, Senator, I wonder as we close. I'm going to say one quick thing, and then I'd love to hear from you. As we're rounding this out, since this is WWOC, I do have to just reiterate my ongoing efforts to force a vote on the Equal Rights Amendment. This is the centennial year, and certainly women and Black folk and our LGBTQ siblings are not reflected in We the People. We are not enshrined in the founding document of this country. And so for the women of this country, especially Black women, the role that we've played on the front lines in the work of liberation for everyone else, while our own was sacrificed, it's been 100 years too long. And I'd like to think that if we had already passed the Equal Rights Amendment, that the Supreme Court would not have been able to do what they did with the Dobbs decision and overturning Roe, because it gives us that legal baseline.
That's right.
Whereby if there is any law that is, because the Equal Rights Amendment, all it is that, equality or equal rights under the law shall not be abridged or denied by the United States or a state on account of sex. So, anything that someone would seek to move that does that, the Equal Rights Amendment, offers those baseline of protections. But also we hope it would allow us to make greater strides in closing pay gaps and inequities and in the other indignities and injustices and disparities that we have normalized and conflated as par for the course in what it means to be a woman in this country, because they have sort of relegated us to a second-class status. So this week, last week, I introduced a discharge petition, and that's something that we use in Congress, whereby if you get 218 signatures, you can force a vote. And just so you know, Senator, that was the same mechanism used to force an ERA vote in the 70s when it did. The problem is when it passed with an arbitrary deadline, and that ratification threshold has been met, but has not yet been honored. And so what I'm saying is that the women of this country have done our job for this democracy on the ballot, at the ballot, in community every day. And the people have done their job because 38 states have ratified. They met that threshold. And now Congress must do it. And so I did just want to name that because of the show that I'm on. This is Woke Women. So I have to talk about, our fight for women. But then I wanted to hear from you. And again, Ricardo, my team will keep us honest on time. But, given your leadership role with the NAACP, and your ability to historically contextualize the significance of the CBC coming to RCC, I'd love to hear from you. What does this national NAACP convention mean to you in this moment? What do you think it should mean for the city and our work? and what of the significance of the Congressional Black Caucus coming to RCC?
So, on the first note, I would say the significance of the moment, that it couldn't be a more appropriate time for Boston. Um, it's been, 40 years since '82 when it was here last. And some people may be stressed, sad that we're dealing with the same issues. I'm not. I'm feeling like what that means is that this is a reminder, right? It's almost like we're gonna get recharged this week. It's not magic. I'm not talking that this is gonna fix all. I'm saying that sometimes people need to be reminded. And so the things that you talked about and the ERA, this is the second time around. In fact, last Thursday was the 175th anniversary of Seneca Falls, when women gathered upstate New York, but not Black women. And the irony that yesterday was Equal Pay Day for Black women in this country. And for people who don't know what that means, is that, people work annually, that it takes a little longer for women, white women, Latino women to earn as much as white men do for similar work. So their day is December 31st at the end of the year. For white women, because they get paid less, it's into April. But for Black women, it's into July. It was yesterday. That means it took us 19 months to earn what it took white men to. So you talk about still relevance. That if that's all you know, then that makes you understand why it's important to continue to have that conversation and the reminders, right?
Yeah, and I do want to say, to your point, the fact that Black women, because I've initiated this legislative response and to do away with the arbitrary deadline, and great momentum. We had the first hearing in the Senate in 40 years on the Equal Rights Amendment. Senator Durbin chaired that. We had a vote in the Senate. It did not pass, and it was very demoralizing to see Republicans marching to the front desk to do a defiant thumb down. But the momentum is behind us. And in fact, Congresswoman Cori Bush and I of St. Louis have now established an ERA caucus, the first ERA caucus in the history of the House. So I just say all that to say that, right, we've done the labor, but we've been left behind. And so the fact that Black women are now leading this movement, that this movement is centering those who have suffered the most without equality, and who stand to benefit the most from gender equality being enshrined in our Constitution. I was speaking at a conference last week, Women to Women, and they were women from all over the globe, and they had no idea. 80% of countries around the globe have already enshrined gender equality in their Constitution.
80%.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
I see your staff is going to start giving us the sign. So what I want.
Anything you want to say about RCC and CBC? Anything as we close?
That's the point. That's what I want to say. I do want to say this about CBC. We've been starved for so long. I was relaying to President Jackie Jenkins Scott the story of what happened 30 years ago, literally in 2000, at the end of Clinton's administration. You'll recall this, that he appropriated, with the support of Congressional Black Caucus, $157 million for Black HIV/AIDS. We were so excited when we saw it. So, of course, we called his office. Where can we go? Because we were in crisis with Black AIDS in Boston and Springfield at the time. His office informed us that that money was only for the congressional districts that had Black CBC members. And so I jokingly, this is honest to God, true story. I called Senator Kennedy's office, and he answers, and I said, you're going to have to figure out a way to become an honorary member of the CBC, because we have a crisis here and we have to get some of that money. And of course, you know him. He was able to do that. We ended up with the second largest grant in the country. How things have changed. Not only do we have our own member, but we're going to play host to a group of members, Congressional Black Caucus. You already know that kind of stuff makes me giddy. I'm just so excited. But I want to add one point to this, that you all come in a moment where we have just begun the conversations with the U.S. Department of Environmental Justice, because of this $1 trillion that we're going to spend, and they're looking for minority. They want institutions. Really, a lot of work all over the country, but specifically minority educational institutions. And our RCC is now an official, predominantly Black institution, and so we're excited about those conversations. We're going to begin those conversations with Dan Blackman, who has been hired specific, who, by the way, is from Orchard Park, folks.
Yes,
right. But my point is that I feel like we have our own representative, and we have an army of caucus members. You said the largest class ever, because the environmental justice piece has to be real, or else we're going to just transition to a new form of energy, and our folks will still be in the back. So I'm excited about you all coming. This is the most exciting part of the convention for me, because it gets to the real deal policy, and long after the convention is gone, our opportunity, and being one of those 10 cities, I'm honored, and I know that we are because of you. But that's the benefit of having a member who is able to move in those spaces. So I appreciate you. Of course, we love you. Rosa, I agree with you. We'll give her all those hearts and more. She works hard. I know that. So I thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Senator. And of course, I think you were honestly the honorary CPC member because you were it.
Once removed. Yes. So I know that feeling. So having somebody there, like I said, I appreciate it, I think, more than most, because I understood the void of not having that voice in the space for us. People think we're in New England. They're doing fine. We have the same issues. You know better because you articulate them every day. You've stated it. So I will certainly be there Saturday one more time to remind people of how to get registered.
Okay.
And, please do.
All right. So join myself and the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Stephen Horsford, and several other Congressional Black Caucus members at the historic Roxbury Community College in its 50th anniversary year, Saturday, July 29th from 3 to 5 p.m. in the academic building. And you can RSVP at democracyforthepeople.org, because that's what this series touring the country is called, Democracy for the People.
Register, folks, register. We'll have a chance to spend quality time. Special edition. We don't usually see us on Thursday afternoon, but this was a special occasion. So Representative Dianne Presley, District 7, Massachusetts, we thank you. We will see you in person. Safe travels, and, take care of that business.
Yes, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Chairman Horsford sends his regrets, and he looks forward to meeting you soon.
Oh, I can't wait.
Take good care.